The benefits of de-incentivizing crimes. Hey everybody, it's Prince of Queens, and people are just talking and talking and talking still about the poor children separated from their parents at the border. And people are trying to say that Obama never separated children from their parents because that clearly never happened. No, not Obama. Obama never would have done something like that. I had to actually research that issue, and it turns out that, yeah, actually he did. Obama did deport several parents. Probably millions, hundreds of thousands. I forget the exact number, but there's a Washington Post article that I will leave a screen capture of about deported parents, and a lot of the time their children are left without parents, and really, really bad things happen. And I like to quote left-wing news sources like the Washington Post, because then you can be consistent with the audience that you're trying to get through to, which in this case, I am trying to generally get through to left-wing people. So if we can show them, yes, this type of thing was happening on Obama's watch according to your news sources. I don't have to come up with a Fox News article to prove that this was happening. The Washington Post is telling in 2015 all about this thing that's basically happening now, happening back then maybe a little bit of perspective might be added to the way in which people perceive this current issue of immigrant families, illegal immigrant families having their parents being separated from their children at the border, and the children are put in camps. Now, one thing that I learned, which I didn't actually know, that Ben Shapiro was actually talking about, is that there was a period in time when the parents weren't just deported and the kids were left with, I don't know, family members or wherever, like maybe they'd end up in the foster care system or something. There was actually a period of time when illegal immigrants would come over here trying to get in with their small children, and then they'd get caught. And then the parents would go to federal prison, and they would take the kids with. So the kids would be in federal prison along with the parents. And the far leftist immigrant rights activist people had a problem with that because they didn't want small innocent children being in prison. So eventually they did away with that. So I guess they simultaneously want it to be so that they have the Dreamer program. Parents can bring over their kids. The kids could potentially become citizens. And then the kids will never have to go to prison, nor will they have to be separated from their families. So basically, the solution sounds kind of like open borders. That sounds kind of like what they seem to be proposing. They don't like to come right out and say it all the time. But, you know, through trial and error, we ask them what they want. They say no, they say no, they say no, they say no. We check off a bunch of boxes, and then we see what they want, which is basically completely unvetted immigration all the time, is what it seems like the left wants. So that's a bit strange. So let's talk about this thing that I spoke of at the beginning of this video. De-incentivizing crimes, right? So my initial read, I don't know, prediction of Trump's motive in doing this, in separating the children from the families, my guess was simply that he was trying to do this as a quick and kind of ruthless spectacle to end the Dreamer program, the D.A.C.A program, the program where parents can bring over their illegal kids and the kid will become a citizen, even though the parent might be deported, and a lot of parents are from really bad places, so they risk it at basically the expense of everybody. Like, there's not a whole lot of people that ultimately really benefit from this. There's some children who get brought over in that way and do become citizens and end up being really glad they became citizens. I've met them in the past, but very, very many children end up, in foster homes, having to live with uncles. A lot of them end up homeless, as this article says. Some of them probably end up having to go back to their country. So the fact that this program exists at all is causing probably more harm overall than it is good. Like, I know it's really, really great to point to this individual and say, see, this person was a dreamer, and then they went to Harvard, and now they are a successful small business or successful HR president at YouTube or something, like, it's great for certain people to point to these individuals and say the personal is political. Look at the great things that the dreamers have accomplished. But ultimately, there's a lot of harm that this is definitely accomplishing. And it's happening by way of creating a motive. There is an incentive for people to break the law and to bring their kids over illegally. And people just don't really think about this stuff very much, so I'm hoping that this video is maybe going to get through to a left-wing person or two that is just starting to think about these issues deeply. But I imagine this kind of train of thought is like libertarian 101 type material, and I came from a left-wing perspective when I was younger, where I largely didn't think about many different political issues very seriously. One of them being immigration. I always knew enough to know that it was very complicated. I didn't want to say too much either for or against immigration. I always wanted to have the leftist big heart and say, well, yeah, people should be able to come into America. Everybody should have a chance because we're all immigrants mostly, because mostly the Native Americans died out, right? I kind of wanted to say that, but then at the same time, I was thinking to myself, okay, but no, you can't just let everybody in. That's not how things work. I've been to areas of town where nobody speaks English, and it's weird, okay? So I accepted that I didn't really know that much about it. I think hopefully a lot of leftist people should think that they don't really know that much about it. And they should start to think about this notion of de-incentivizing crimes. And I'm going to give a parallel. And this has to be very, very basic, but just think about this, because maybe you've never even thought about this before. So let's say you had a problem with drugs in your neighborhood, right? Some particular neighborhood had a lot of gang activity, drug sales, drug addiction, gang violence that had to do with drugs, right? It all kind of comes together. As soon as there's lots of drug selling, there's turf wars and that kind of a thing. So let's say it's mostly marijuana, just to make it easy. Now, granted, it wouldn't be. If it was real drug problems, it would be cocaine and heroin type stuff. That's the really addictive stuff, and that's where it would get really bad. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that it was marijuana. And a lot of left-wing type politicians, and, I'm not making this up, I've heard people say things like that. They'll say, you know what we should do to solve the problems? Let's decriminalize having marijuana if you own under 5 grams. If you're in possession of under 5 grams, or you get caught selling under 5 grams, we're just going to decriminalize that. No punishment for having under 5 grams. But if you have over 5 grams, then you're going to get in trouble. Because we don't want to get people in trouble. We know that when people get in trouble, then things are bad, right? Right? Well, there's a problem with that. Ultimately, what that does is it incentivizes the crime. Because what it does to make it so that you can freely sell 5 grams or less, basically, is that it provides a massive, massive motive for the larger traffickers to try to traffic large quantities because they know they can easily find petty drug dealers to sell all their drugs. So somebody that's in their 30s can think to himself, hey, I know somebody who works at a weed farm. I'm going to go get myself ounces and ounces and ounces of weed from that guy, and then I'm going to sell it all to a bunch of little high school kids who are just going to sell grams, and they're never going to get in trouble. So as long as I don't get caught selling it to these kids, this operation is going to continue, and I'm going to get rich, and the high school kids are going to buy themselves some new PlayStation 4s and whatever high school kids spend their money on these days. I really don't know. Do they go see 3D IMAX movies? Because I do that sometimes. So you've incentivized the crime by decriminalizing it at a small level. You've incentivized it at a greater level, even though it's still illegal for the large-scale drug trafficking to happen. You've incentivized it and made it more profitable because, you know, yes, the person is taking a risk by breaking the law, but the people that he's working with, his underlings, aren't really taking a risk. So he's never going to run out of underlings, so he has every motive to keep doing this. And there's been a lot of drug laws in place that are like that, which is why there's a massive amount of drugs in the United States. So right-wing people, at least the right-wing people that I talk to, which tend to be libertarians, the libertarian people generally say one of two things. Actually, I think it's usually simply that they should legalize drugs, and then people should be able to just have them, and then problem solved. I don't know if I want to... I'm not going to die on the hill arguing against that point. I've definitely used a fair amount of drugs in my life, and there's certain things that I don't want certain people getting their hands on. But at the same time, I don't know. Natural selection, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and argue that point. But the other side of the fence would be to criminalize all of it. Any amount of possession, any amount of dealing would have different sentences based around how much and what exactly you were doing with it. Were you selling? Were you buying? How much did you possess? And you go from there. But if you make it inconsistent and you make it like really, really inconsistent to the point where you potentially decriminalize a very small transaction, well, you've provided a motive for the bigger transactions. And so the same thing is true with D.A.C.A, with the Dreamer program. Because of the fact that children have been given impunity from our immigration laws, then children are going to be subject to their parents who are basically kind of acting like the drug traffickers in this metaphor, breaking the law and having their children not get in trouble for it. And then their children maybe gets to be the breadwinner in America for the rest of the family back home. The parent takes the risk. The kid is expected to do super well in America and then provide for the family. And the family ends up making money. So the only thing you can really do is either get rid of D.A.C.A or just completely open our borders. And I have a feeling I know which option is actually going to happen. I'm just explaining what I observe. And I hope that this helps some people. Okay, guys, I swear, I'm going to have a scripted video no later than Monday. I actually started writing about a page of one. I've been having a lot going on in my personal life. I've fallen behind. Hopefully you enjoyed this whole week or so of non-scripted videos. Thanks.